One man got a view from the air and toured several communities around Saskatchewan that have been hit by flood, and that's Brad Wall. He spent yesterday surveying the damage, and he joins me on the line now. Good morning, Premier Wall.
Hi, Sheila.
So what are some of we just heard Sean's description at one location, Crooked Lake. What were some of the memorable sights for you yesterday?
Well, Crooked Lake's pretty bad. We flew over there twice, once heading down to the more southeastern corner of the damaged area, the flood area, and then on the way back to Melville. And it's pretty hard to describe. If you don't know Crooked Lake that well, you would think that people had built cabins in the middle of the lake. They have lakefront and lake back property, and for many of them actually, and for some fairly new ones that look like some under construction. So, I think we have now deployed many thousands of sandbags in the area. Our response teams are responding to Crooked and some of the lakes in that part of the Quebec Valley where the peaking probably doesn't happen till later today. And it'll be close to records. In the case of Round Lake, it'll exceed the record from 55, and it'll be real close for Crooked, which was also set in 1955, but likely higher than 11. But, on the ground, the communities, what you see, it's remarkable, both the extent of the water and the damage, but also what's remarkable is the response. It's hard, even after a day like that, to not come away pretty inspired by Saskatchewan people who were doing some remarkable things. There's some pretty good stories, Sheila. I'll just share a few of them.
Yeah,
for example,
I would love for you to share a few of them.
In Carnduff, that's sort of a center now for the neighboring community of Gainsborough, which had to be evacuated, and some residents are going back to Gainsborough, but the evac center is still open, and of course it's manned by volunteers. They put out a call for clothing, for example, at the school. That's the evacuation center. And I think they said, they did this on Facebook, I think they said within 20 minutes they had to tell people to stop because of what was coming. They did the same thing with food, and people just brought food, including some of the local merchants. They have a free store set up there now. People can just come and grab what they need. Also, at that particular evacuation center that was set up to accommodate people to sleep there, the town would have none of it. They billeted everyone from 90 families plus from Gainsborough, billeted in Carnduff, people opening up their campers and their driveways and the campground open, their houses open. And I don't think anyone slept in the center that first night, neither yesterday. And it's an amazing story. I think when Gainsborough was in some difficulty early on in this process, they put out a call there for some people to come on sandbagging, again through Facebook. And the mayor reported that while he was heading back down the highway to his home community, he passed, this would have been minutes later really, half an hour maybe, he passed 52 trucks responding. Lots of young people, he noted, who were driving the other way because they were following this thing on social media. So there's stories like that. In Melville, the health region was able, and their team and volunteers were able to evacuate the hospital, which is also the personal care home, in about an hour and a half at 4:30 a.m. to get them out of that hospital and long-term care safely into the recreation complex there, and then we had a tour of that. There's a lot of volunteers working there and a lot of staff from the health region obviously taking care of those patients and residents. And I've used the word over and over again. It was remarkable. They pulled that off in such short order at 4:30 in the morning. And of course, happily, the dam did not break. I think they were just worried about breaches there, and that's why the hospital would have been, in some trouble then. The water was getting close. So they did the right thing from a cautionary standpoint, and I think they'll be moving back to the hospital today.
And of course, the enormity of this crisis calls for an enormous solution, and I'm wondering where you are at right now in terms of the estimate of what all of this is going to cost and how that might break down.
It's a very preliminary estimate, admittedly, but, it's going to be more damage than from a 211 just because of the size of the area impacted and much more highway damage, significant highway damage. So 211 was about $360-some million when it was all said and done. This is just the cost to damage, not sort of the economic impact, because there's always business interruption. Obviously, there's agricultural issues. So 360 just for the damage from 11. It'll be bigger than that. Now, it's a federal provincial response in these things, the programs and the funding, and our cost in 211 was about $165 7 of that. So it's going to be a larger number. And, this is a question people are asking, and I'm answering it, but I'm also saying as best I can, as best we can, but I'm also saying and reminding folks that we'll worry about that later. The first thing we're going to do is respond. And
well, sorry to interrupt, but what are the priorities right now, the immediate priorities from a government standpoint?
It's recovery right now. And in the case of places like Crooked and Round and others where they're in Glass Mountain, where the water's still rising, our response teams are still deploying, sandbags and some of the water tubes in the equipment that we now have. We have, partly because of 11 and 2010, frankly, we've been acquiring more equipment, which I think it has helped the rapid response teams and communities. The water tubes are especially effective, I'm told, and obviously sandbagging is still a very viable way to fight back a flood. So that's part of it. And then the second piece is recovery. And we've got, the Water Security Agency is working with communities on their sewer and water issues because we need that to be on, obviously, for people. The Crown corporations are out there. I think Sask Energy, we've asked them after talking to Gainsborough folks yesterday to get, if they could get some folks down there and check on the gas situation in that community as it recovers. So it's both response still and switching more and more to recovery.
And is it, when it comes to paying for it, is it going to be a straight transfer? Do you just take, here's this money in the rainy day fund, we had rainy days, here's the money, let's apply it to these different programs? Is that how it'll work?
Yes, we pay. We'll pay for the work and for the recovery up front, and then whatever is owing from the feds will wait. Sheila, in past years we've had. I should update your listeners quickly on the status of PDAP because we've had to add some resources there. It hasn't always been as timely a response as we would all like. People work very hard at it, but there have been issues. So we're in a better spot now. About 95% of claims from previous years are closed. There are still a few that are open, and sometimes that's because infrastructure that's still frankly underwater or changed completely has not been, rebuilt and therefore not built to the program. There's still a few baby disputed claims, but we're at 95%. 75% complete from last year. There were a few claims last year. And so the other priority for government is not just to make this available, but we need to make sure it's a timely response because people will have incurred big costs and then they're reimbursed. And we just don't want the delays, so we're going to be focused on that as well.
I talked to a hydrology expert yesterday, and he actually referred to what we're seeing in terms of flooding in Saskatchewan. He called it a regime change. He said it's very significant, and he said part of it is we're now getting multiple day rainfalls, which he attributes to climate change. But he said the second source of the problem is farmers draining their land, and he pointed to a need for greater regulation there. Is that something you're going to look at?
Well, we talked a lot about that yesterday with some of the municipal leaders, the RMs, and this is an issue we've been looking at already. There's a real balance here. To be sure, we need to make sure that public safety is paramount in the consideration of what happens with drainage and the ditching that occurs. We also are talking about private property, so we need to find the balance with obviously a priority on public safety. We have been working on several initiatives through environment to try to get a better handle on that particular issue, which is a long-standing issue in the province. I think that's a fair comment, and it's obviously going to move up the priority list here in the months ahead.
How do you find a balance, though? Either you regulate or you don't, right?
Well, when you regulate is perhaps where the balance is. When is it? That's where we have the engineers and experts that will be able to, I think, help out with what kind of drainage might be contributory in terms of these things, and other trenching or ditching that may not be contributory.
What's your greatest concern? I mean, I know you heard a lot of stories and you saw some really disturbing things, but what would you say right now as Premier is your greatest concern about the aftermath of this flood?
Well, the infrastructure piece of the property stuff, the damages are really secondary. You worry about our people. We are all worried about them. There has not been loss of life. So I mean, we're blessed for that. There hasn't been major major injuries is my understanding as of to date. But there are, and when you look people in the eyes, there's another kind of health. There's mental health, and people are there's great resolve and resilience, but people have been through a lot. So I think that's what I would worry about the most.
All right. Well, thanks so much for speaking with us. We appreciate your time.
Have a good day.
You too.